Hi folks, we're Taskless Today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the corruption of and the subversion of not only the legal system but jury trials, indeed the subversion of juries. Juries that consist primarily of straight white Christian men have been defamed to a point where the attitude is amongst the legal profession and the commentariat that any jury that consists even a majority of straight white men must be evil and prejudiced. This comes twofold. One is straight white men who are ideologically pitched at the top of the totem pole, the victim totem pole, don't know what it's like to suffer victimhood. And on the other side, then they're the people that did that were against LGBTQ. They're the slavery people. They're the evil ones. They have the accumulated guilt of centuries, and therefore that should disqualify them from any judgment of someone who is anywhere placed along the victim totem pole. So it's hard to imagine a more perverted and ridiculous and absurd, and I would argue destructive attitude to the law and justice and outcomes through courts. But I'm going to juxtapose two propaganda pieces. One was the 1950s movie 12 Angry Men, and it's viewed as a classic. I'm not exactly sure why, but it stars Henry Fonda and quite a few people at the time that were starting to make a big impression in the acting scene in the United States. It's set in New York, and again Henry Fonda fronts it. He was a big name at the time, but there are other actors that went on to become quite prominent: Martin Balsam, Lee J. Cobb, and Ed Begley, and others. Anyway, the setting, really, the message hasn't changed from the 1950s in that movie to the propaganda piece that recently came out. So let me just talk a bit about both of those. Now, 12 Angry Men was, I think it came out in like the mid-1950s, around there, and before I was born. But I first watched it, I think, many years later when I was, I think at our history teacher at high school, who we were covering something about how Western jurisprudence had developed, the separation of powers, the glorious revolution in Britain, and that sort of stuff. I think we're covering that time. Teacher said, "Well, have a look at this movie because it's on TV, this coming weekend or whenever it was." So I watched it, and at the time, being, I don't know, 14, perhaps 13, 14, something like that, I viewed it as cutting edge social commentary at the time. And I there's something about the teenage mind that makes us susceptible to this idea of there are these mysterious, unseen, unknown dark forces sort of holding you back, and you want to strike a blow against them, but you just don't know where they are, so you lash out at everything, that sort of thing, which seems to be very much, AOC and those people, even into their 30s, are still living that sort of teenage fantasy perception of the world. But even then, I remember having my reservations. So there were a few things in it that didn't add up, that in the movie that didn't add up. If you're going to claim A, then B contradicts it. So how can you then deduce C? And even at that time, there were things that didn't sit well with me, even though in an overall sense, I went along with this idea. Now, the movie, I'll just sort of give you a brief overview of the movie. The movie 12 Angry, it was set in New York, I guess in the 1950s. And it was 12 white men all wearing shirts and ties and clean shaven and upstanding citizens, all that sort of stuff. And they were the jury to decide on first-degree murder for I think it was a Latino kid who's like 18 or something, and he was charged with murdering his father, stabbing him to death, as I recall, And so he was arrested, brought to trial, the evidence was given, and the movie cuts in just as the jury is being sent off to deliberate on so you don't get to see the evidence, but deliberate on the verdict. Now, the judge says, well, look, if you come back with a guilty verdict, this kid is going to go to the electric chair, or he's not guilty, in which case he walks out the door. So these people, now the way it was, I should add that the movie was conceived and put together by people who were not Christian Gentiles, if I can put it that way. And so their perception of victimhood and being the victims of random, unwarranted, malicious prejudice was very much, I think, at the forefront of their minds as they were, well, not very well, I think it was very much at the forefront of their minds when they put the movie together and created the characters. Now, it starts off with 11 of them say, look, it's an open and shut case. The kid killed the father. It's murder. So, but one juror holds out. This was the Henry Fonda character, who's presented as some serene, almost heavenly type figure. And he starts to say, well, look, this kid's had a raw deal. He's been in and out of foster homes. The father was an abusive drunkard, and so on and so forth. And his mother died, and the kids had a rough time of it, and so on and so forth. So can we really say he's guilty given the circumstances surrounding him? That is the unfortunate upbringing and so on. And again, the abusive father. So the idea was that the facts, and this was a soft version of it, the facts don't actually matter. The evidence doesn't really matter because there are ideological, sociological circumstances that would have created or would have were the forces that would have shaped this kid and caused him to, this is the young Latino man, would have forced him to or created the circumstances that would have led him to stabbing his father. Now, if the father was so abusive and this, that, and the next thing, I don't know why self-defense didn't come up, and that doesn't appear to get a run here. So I view that as an inconsistency. For example, was he being attacked by the father, in which case it was self-defense and so on. But anyway, just going with the script. The script was trying to illustrate, not perfectly, I thought. The script was trying to illustrate that really the facts and evidence don't matter when you've got someone who's a sociological victim, an ideological victim. If they're an ideological victim, then should they really be held responsible for what they do? Because if you decide they're a victim and therefore not responsible, or minimally responsible, or reduced responsible, then you can't convict them of what they've done. Therefore, the facts and the evidence don't matter because the other, the ideological situation came about. So this was the argument back in the time. Now, the people on the jury were depicted as, careless in one sense. As one guy is depicted as going, look, okay, the kid's guilty. I got a ticket to a football match or baseball match, whatever it was. I want to get to that. It cost me good money, and I want to get. So can we just look? The kid's guilty. I want to be out of here. Others were saying, those Latinos are always getting in trouble. They're always now. But bear in mind, just the wider architecture of New York at the time. They were taking in a lot of, Puerto Ricans and so on, and these Puerto Ricans were forming gangs, and there were street fights and street battles between gangs, and it was this idea that they were just being unreasonably depicted. That Puerto Ricans were a big part of the criminal sort of situation, if you like, in New York at the time, and so it was a big deal, and it was in the newspapers every day. Would that have possibly prejudiced attitudes? Well, likely, but it was real. It was a real thing. It was not invented. It wasn't just evil racists having a go here. There wasn't that. There were serious Latino gang problems, murders, and all sorts of things going on. So, and that wasn't mentioned. It should have been. Instead, the jurors that said that the Latinos are troublemakers were depicted as that's unwarranted. There's no, you just hate Latinos, you damn bigot. And that wasn't explicitly stated. It was implied though. And so each one of the jurors was depicted as, other than the Henry Fonda character, was depicted as harboring some unreasonable, unfounded prejudice. So sure, they're upstanding citizens, clean shaven and neatly groomed and wearing shirts and ties and so on. Sure, but really they harbored, evil, malicious prejudices. And I think the movie failed in that sense. So there was one guy there, one juror who was sticking straight to the facts and flawless logic, but even he was depicted as prejudiced in the sense that he wouldn't accept the ideological, sociological stuff of the kid who'd had a rough upbringing. So even he was portrayed unsympathetically in that. So the only juror who was treated with sympathy was the one who wanted to consider the ideological issues. And now the movie ended without a verdict, without the jury reaching a verdict. But it showed that each one of the jurors was eventually, except for one, I think, each one of the jurors was eventually brought around to the Henry Fonda thing, which is consider the ideology, consider the sociology. And so the facts kind of don't really matter. The evidence doesn't really. The evidence says clearly that he did it. The evidence has the proof and it's this sort of thing. Although there was some questions asked of could it really have happened as described? There was questions about the evidence and its veracity. Now, why didn't the kid's attorney address those? Why did the members of the jury, who were not legally trained and no experts, how are they able to find flaws in the evidence that the kid's own lawyer didn't pick up? Was the kid's own lawyer a fascist Nazi? And so, anyway, it just didn't add up. Now, fast forward to last year, when there's a really similar type of, and this is a TV production, not a movie. Now this time they've picked a brown homosexual guy who supposedly has murdered his gay lover. Now there are a few things that don't work here. The guy can barely speak English, but he's somehow very rich and lives in a neighborhood where the house he lives in cost over $3 million. How that works is anybody's guess. But anyway, he's not the brown. So in order to sort of project victim here, he's brown, he's homosexual, he's not very bright. In fact, the way they portray him in the show, I mean, he'd have an IQ of 80 tops. So anyway, he's the victim, and the jury is convened to consider, was it accidental death, like third degree murder in the US, or manslaughter as it's called in Australia, or was it premeditated murder? And there's no electric chair here, but there was in the 12 Angry Men movie, but there's 25 years in prison. So it's when you deprive anyone of liberty or their life, for that matter, I think it is a very serious issue, and the evidence is absolutely paramount, I would argue. But anyway, in the show here, they're again suggesting it's implied that all straight white males, particularly if they're Christians, really are incapable of serving on a jury. They just don't get the ideology of it. They want facts and evidence. They're all prejudiced Nazis anyway, and so they're depicted in a very unsympathetic light. They're either malicious and evil, or just stupid buffoons that again shouldn't be on a jury. Now, as it turns out, the jury has four or five gay, lesbian, LGBT. There's a trans person. It's got two lesbians, two homosexuals. Then it's got people who like are very arty, they're out of work actors and that sort of thing, and they're very sympathetic to the police are all depicted as straight white males, prejudiced, brutish, menacing, evil, racist, bigoted, and they're depicted in the most unflattering light you can possibly imagine, when all of them are white and all of them are male. Now, this is, as it turns out, the police station that it's meant to be a reenactment of an actual case, but they're taking a lot of poetic license here. The police station that these police officers come from is like 65% non-white. They've got a majority of Asian officers and functionaries and so on. And if someone has any language problems, they get someone like an officer, a liaison officer assigned to them who speaks their language. But the way the program put it is that it was only white officers, only male officers. There was no language interpreter or translator or anything like that. The legal aid lawyer or the lawyer appointed, it's unclear whether it's the guy's own. I mean, if you can live in a $3 million house, you've probably got enough money to hire a lawyer. But anyway, so the lawyer apparently doesn't speak the guy's language either, so I don't know how they communicated. But and the lawyer didn't stop or interfere with any of the police questioning or anything like that, which again was projected as being all bigoted, racist, straight white males. So they're loading the dice very heavily to encourage the viewers to see the brown homosexual male as the victim of unspeakable the prejudice is everywhere. Racism, bigotry is just baked into the system. So again, the viewer is encouraged to look at it not as a did the person kill them or did the accused kill the other guy. They're encouraged not to see it that way. Okay, sure, they're the facts, but the facts don't really matter. You must see the wider context. And the jurors, you're supposed to, and this is where the poetic license comes in, the jurors are speculating on the evidence. And it's, well, look, those police are so prejudiced. Look, the police really, and the evidence wasn't really discussed. It was kind of mentioned, but it was every conversation takes in, and there's these airhead women who, well, I think he's brown and he's gay and he's such a big and this is sort of put forward quite strongly, and just counting up the comments and discussions the jury's supposed to have. The facts barely get a run, and instead the ideology comes in. That really, look, because he's brown and gay. I mean, even if he did it, he didn't really mean to. He's not. I mean, he's a social victim. He's not malicious and bad. It's the white people. It's the white males. They're the bad people. They're the ones that he's a victim. He's on the victim totem pole. Why don't we just tell him he was naughty, give him a bit of a finger wagging, slap on the wrist, and then let him go? He didn't really mean to do it. And then these gay people have been oppressed for centuries by evil, straight, white, male people. So, shouldn't we just give him a free pass on murder because of his victimhood? So this is very much part of the narrative that they put forward. And again, the facts don't matter, but this works both ways. And there's a new law being mooted by one of the regional governments in Australia. Now, this new law is about supposed hate speech. And it begins from the position that people on the victim totem pole, brown gay people, black people, lesbian women, trans, whatever, these people are marginalised groups. They're marginalised groups, they're oppressed. And we must protect the oppressed. We must protect the oppressed from, who? Well, the oppressors, of course. So anyone that says anything negative or criticises them is an oppressor. If they're oppressor, it means they're engaging in hate speech. If they're engaging in hate speech, which again is all ideologically determined, engaging in hate speech, that means that they had intent to spread hate, which means they are now a criminal in the same way you'd be a criminal if you murdered somebody or assaulted somebody or raped somebody or breaking and entering and stealing. It's so that it then becomes a crime, but not a crime because a crime is committed, because a crime through a series of ideological determinations and escalations. So it can go from the direction, well, any jury, if it's an all-white male jury, you must have a majority. If a brown gay guy is going to be, or a brown lesbian, if it's going to be judged by a jury, that jury should be brown and lesbian or brown and gay. If you've got even one white person on there, then you have an evil oppressor, and so on. So that ideological construction is how it's all put together. And again, this goes, as I mentioned, with the regional government and the supposed hate speech laws for victimhood. The victim class is ideologically determined. It's not determined by facts or evidence. It's ideologically determined. The oppressor class, again, is ideologically determined. What they say, having malicious or evil or sinister or hateful intent, is ideologically determined. And the evidence bar for police to bring, or activist prosecutors rather, to bring charges against someone, that bar is lowered to the point where the person who's accused has to prove that they were not motivated by malicious, hateful intent. Now it's about an impossible task. So once they come after you, once an activist prosecutor comes after you, you're screwed, you're done. And the state will pick up the case. All it requires is a trans person to say, that person over there upset me, and they just look them up. Oh, okay, well, they're further up you've got a better position on the victim totem pole than they do. Therefore, they are the relative oppressor. So we will use all the resources of the state, the taxpayer resources of the state, to go after this person. And we'll accuse them of something that they really can't defend against. We'll accuse them of having intent for malicious hate. Now, all they need to do is find one history book about World War II, which so many people would have on their bookshelves anyway in one form or another. All they need to do is find one book on your bookshelf. Yeah, there's pictures of Hitler in there and swastikas. That's it. That's all the proof we need. That's it. We can prove now you're filled with hate. You're a Nazi and a fascist, and you're a guilty motherfucker. So that's, again, so the ideology determines the relationship of facts and evidence to the outcome of the case. Now remember, this 12 Angry Men is going back to the 1950s, but already it was being put forward as a court. Now, I do understand, by the way, and I remember this from school, kids that came from more brutish and unfortunate upbringings did tend to have more behavioural problems, as in they were angry and everything, more behavioural problems than kids who came from stable, loving background. That's sort of just goes. And I remember seeing that as a kid and having some sympathy for those in that those situations. To what extent does that mean you can go around murdering people and get a free pass? The reverse is also just because, well, you're not a victim, you're not a social victim. You were brought up in a loving, stable thing. So anything you say, we can accuse you of being a Nazi. That also would be a massive overreach and an absurd overreach. But this is where we are today. This is what's going on. And is it a subversion and perversion of the law? You bet. And increasingly the laws, whether it's the January 6th stuff in the US or the recent protests in the UK, if you're a straight white male, then you are held to the highest standard of accountability. But if unless you're a flunky for the globalists, of course. But if you're on the victim totem pole, then your standard of accountability is much lower. And that in itself is a terrible perversion of the system and administration of justice. You've been Tassus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.